Well, after another chaotic week in the NFL, the Detroit Lions once again have a little bit of chaos and drama following them as well. But at least it comes off the back of yet another win, this time over the division rival Minnesota Vikings. Welcome in, everyone, to the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me is my co host, Alex Drain. And Alex, how are we feeling after another big Lions win?
I think pretty good overall. Some people got a little down last night about some off the field news, which we will get into later. But I think the overall result of beating the Vikings is a lot more important than the off the field distractions. You went on the road against a team that was 5-0, big divisional game, and you came out of there with a win, shouldered adversity both at the beginning and the end of the game. And I think that's it tells us quite a bit about this team and what they're made of.
Yeah, and this was a game that obviously a lot of fans were looking forward to on both sides. Minnesota fans were looking to shut some Lions fans up now that the Lions are good, and we have been very vocal about the team. And Lions fans once again wanted to take it to Minnesota, who I think, like obviously the Packers are the Lions' biggest rival, but I think in terms of like fan hatred, I think there's a lot more animosity towards Vikings fans over the last couple of years. Whereas Packers fans, like, they can be respectful, they can have some fun banter, but Vikings fans just they hate Lions right now and Lions fans. So getting this win, little extra satisfying, but it was not the cleanest start to the game. In fact, so we kind of have to structure this a little differently. We usually talk about the offense first, but I just want to talk about that first 10 minutes or so, the first quarter really, where the Lions, it was probably their worst start since the Baltimore game last year that everyone remembers. And, in the blink of an eye, the Lions were down 10-0. Everything seemed horrible. It just like, how are you feeling after the first quarter in terms of your confidence?
My confidence was pretty low. There's still a lot of time in that game, but it was really trending in a poor direction. That first sequence, you have a penalty on Awasika, then a sack, gets backed up. You wave the white flag on third down. It's like, wow, this is not the start we wanted. But then, really, the big swing is the fake punt into the touchdown against, and you're like, oh boy. And then you punt again right after that. Then they go down and get a field goal. You punt again. At that point, it felt like, man, this is the Ravens game number two. Like they don't have it today, and that's okay because you're gonna have a couple duds during the course of the season. Is honestly where I was at that point. But then it just kind of flipped. You did force a punt, and then once the long Gibbs run happened, the game totally changed. That was really, to me, the turning point of that one.
Yeah, and we can transition that into the offense, and we can start off with the man of the hour. This is probably Jahmyr Gibbs' most complete game of his career so far. He wound up with over 160 total yards, a couple of touchdowns, and the longest run of his career to really ignite the Lions offense. And I would just like to say, I need to start speaking ill of more Lions players because apparently I'm good at reverse jinxing things into existence. Last week, we talked about how it's very odd that despite Gibbs' explosiveness, David Montgomery had gotten more of the explosive touchdown runs so far in the two since in each of their Lions careers. Jahmyr Gibbs decided he wanted in on some of that action on just a beautiful play. Like it was blocked well. Tim Patrick, great block at the second level. And this is what the Lions want to do. You get Jahmyr Gibbs in open space and you ask him to make one guy miss. One guy and he's gone, and that's exactly what happened on this play. And like throughout the game, Gibbs was spectacular. Part of that is obviously the offensive line is very good run blocking, but in a game where David Montgomery was not as good, what did you like from Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yeah, the touchdown run was brilliant. The way he ghosts the safety was just terrific. His second touchdown run right before the end of the half was a solid run as well. He had another great run on the last drive of the game, the field goal drive. That's like a 15-yard run that he rips off, just churning out extra yardage, dragging tacklers. And then he gets the screen on that drive as well. He was making plays every time he was out there, continued to show us all the things we know he can do, but this was definitely his best game of the season so far, and they needed him to step up because you've leaned on Montgomery through 5 games, and it was not a great showing from him overall. And once the fumble happens, then you have to lean on Gibbs, and he stepped up in the biggest moments, and that's what you want to see from him.
Yeah. And, I think especially on that last drive, Gibbs was showing that he was just a step ahead of the Vikings all day. They could not contain his explosiveness and his acceleration, really. He was getting up to his top speed so quickly that the Vikings just could not plug the gaps the way that they wanted to compared to when Montgomery was running the ball. And, Montgomery was banged up in this game. I think that is important to note. He had some sort of contusion or Charlie horse bruise going on the back of his knee, which, is it's a pain management thing, but that is definitely something that he had to work through. The fumble, killer, but the Lions made up for it. This game was weird because if the Lions had lost, we could have come on here and talked about how it's a game of inches. The Vikings get a fumble return for a touchdown. The Lions were inches away from a fumble return for a touchdown of their own. But as for the offense, one of the other key cogs, and really the player that has somehow worked his way into potential MVP conversation after a very mediocre start that we criticized, Jared Goff is having a spectacular month of October.
I think that mediocre might be a little generous for how bad it was to start the year, and I think if he'd been more towards his usual expectation those first 2 weeks, he might be the MVP frontrunner at this point. He's still digging out of those early 2 week hole, but last 4 weeks have been about as good as you can play. I just want to note for a moment, I generally think PFF is pretty solid. I think they do a good job grading a lot of facets of the game. I don't really, in general, care much about their quarterback grading because that's an area that I feel like I can grade myself without watching all the game tape, generally speaking. But I was looking at this last night, and his passing grades are bizarre. Like, I have no clue what is going on with that company. Like, he, in the last 4 games where he's played about as perfect as you could ever play, week to week, he's ranking like 8th, 5th, 11th in passing grade for that given week. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, like so I didn't see the specific grade for his game against Minnesota. What I did see was that him and Gibbs were both I like neither of them were above an 80, I think, which is
Yeah, so this week he's at 75.6, fifth among quarterbacks, below Justin Herbert. And I was looking at this like late last night, so I don't know how quickly they got a score up on Justin Herbert for a game that had ended like 2 hours earlier. But Mariota, Geno, and Allen, the previous week against the Cowboys, Goff goes 18 of 25 for 315, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 73 grade, ninth among quarterbacks in passing grade, behind Trevor Lawrence, who was 23 of 35 for 6.7 yards an attempt, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. What are we doing here? The week before that he plays against the Seahawks, he sets the NFL record for most passes with no incompletions. 18 of 18, 292, 2 touchdowns. 75 grade, 11th among quarterbacks, behind Andy Dalton and Derek Carr. Derek Carr was 28 of 30 for 6.6 yards an attempt, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. Also behind Daniel Jones. What?
Yeah. No words. Like in this game specifically, he had what? One missed throw? Maybe like
Yep.
one throw that you were like, he should have had that one, and that was the deep shot to Raymond where he literally missed it by like maybe a yard or two, and it was just because pressure was in his face and he had to step up. Like I don't know what PFF is watching, and same thing with Gibbs. Like Jahmyr Gibbs has that incredible game, super hyper efficient, had like 7.7 a carry, multiple touchdowns, on like a ton of touches, and he's not one of the Lions' 5 best graded players from that game. It's very weird. I'll like PFF. It like that's why you always have to take their grades with a massive grain of salt because you're leaving their grades up to PFF's interpretation of how each position is supposed to be played. So I don't know. Very very odd. But Goff absolutely spectacular in this game. Really did good against the blitz, but just against pressure in general. This is a game where the offensive line was not their best performance. We'll say they I think allowed 41% pressure rate. Coyote Awashika had a rough first quarter, started to settle in the middle too. Frank Ragnow and Sewell were good as always. Graham, not his best day, but the real kicker was Taylor Decker. One of the worst games we've seen from him in a while. Gives up a sack, which a strip sack that could have been a lot worse if Goff didn't fall on it at a crucial moment, and just gave up a good amount of pressure as well. How big of a factor was the Vikings defensive line able to make in this game?
They did a good job. Partially organic rush, partially that they just blitzed a ton. That was definitely part of it. I thought Goff handled the blitzes pretty well. The biggest issues were those pressures against Decker because those were like four-man rushes, and I think it was Grenard, right, that
Yeah,
was
for the
giving
most
Decker
part,
the
yeah.
problems. Yeah, and Van Ginkel had a couple good rushes. The miss to Raymond was a Van Ginkel related incident where he came in and drove the lineman back just enough that he got his footwork a little off, but not the best OL game in pass protection. We've seen that a little bit this year at times, but overall, Goff handled it really quite well. My feeling on this Vikings defense didn't really change in terms of I do think they are a good defense, all that stuff. I still think it is a little bit gimmicky, and I problem is there's just not enough like good quarterbacks to really test this theory anymore, and like especially good veteran quarterbacks because you look at the teams Vikings have played, they played, Texans, Niners, Packers, all of which in theory have good quarterbacks. They're all young quarterbacks. And I just feel like what the Vikings do, if this were the NFL that were still populated by Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, wind the clocks back to 2014. I feel like the Vikings defense would have harder problems because they still just kind of show you what they're going to do and then just trust that they're going to win in those matchups. They get a free rusher to Goff, boom, he just throws right at the blitz, completion, move the sticks, and that kind of thing. And I thought in particular that touchdown run Gibbs had right before halftime. I mean, I called that pre-snap. I'm like,
Yeah,
third and six, they don't have an inside linebacker. They're at the line of scrimmage. They have nothing in the second level between the line of scrimmage and the goal line. Like check into a run if you get a
yep.
single block, it's a touchdown. And it just feels like we've seen now Brian Flores against Goff going back to last year that when you have this sort of veteran quarterback who's been around and who's seen it all, he can just kind of know what you're doing. And if he gets enough time, he'll kind of slice and dice, and he did.
Yeah. And that run at the end of the half that you mentioned, like that is a perfect example of the Lions just being willing to run on third downs a lot. A play where it's third and goal from the 8 and the Vikings have a lot of people right around the line of scrimmage, and you just run behind Frank Ragnow, you get to the second level, it's an easy walk-in touchdown. Like that was one that I think every Lions fan probably had marked as, hey, run the ball, this is going to work, because they have too many guys at the line. That's the danger with having so many blitzers, is if they don't get the stop at the line, you're cooked. We saw, like, the Lions have been burned by that over the years too. And as for the Brian Flores defense, I think it's just one of those things where they are always going to, as long as he's the DC, they are going to be excellent in the first couple of weeks of the season when, he changes a few things, but teams haven't really settled into their offense. And then as the season goes on, you're going to see them progressively get worse because people start to figure them out and start to realize, hey, how to beat them is actually very simple. You just have to do a few things really well, be good on the offensive line, have some check down options, and you'll be fine. Over the past few years, though, in the matchups that the Lions and Vikings have had, I think the Lions are responsible for 3 of the 4 30-plus point games against the Vikings in the last 2 years. Like, I there is an air of the Lions have this guy's number, so that is worth mentioning. But it is gimmicky, as you say, and I'm kind of disappointed that the Jets couldn't help us out and that Aaron Rodgers decided to turn into a pumpkin against the Vikings when he really should be better than that and should be able to beat a team that does this kind of stuff. But on the whole, very happy with how Goff stood in and handled the pressure. The one play in particular that I wanted to highlight was the touchdown to Amon-Ra St. Brown, where Tim Patrick, great block on the backside. Goff looks left to bait Harrison Smith, very like a veteran safety, very good safety, to go over to Jamison Williams, who was also open for a touchdown on that play. And he just bombs it long. And it's an absolutely perfect pass to Amon Ra. Byron Murphy was crashing in from the outside corner spot to try to get to the slot where Amon Ra was. And he honestly got there. Like it was fine coverage, but just picture perfect ball placement from Goff. And, when he's on like this, like his accuracy is among the best in the league right now. It's hard to match that, and it's hard to beat that if you're a defense.
Yeah, the throw to Amon-Ra for the touchdown, I think, is on the short list of best Goff throws during his time as a Detroit Lion. I also think the one to Amon-Ra on the last drive, the one that kind of set them up with the ability to bleed the clock, terrific throw, tight window. Amon-Ra had a great game. He had 8 catches on 8 targets. Hard to beat that. Pretty much vintage performance from him. So give him a shout out. When you have Goff in rhythm like this, the Lions are going to be a hard team to beat no matter what. And that's kind of I think the big story coming out of this game is we had those serious concerns in the first 2 weeks and then really have turned a page. And it's been a remarkable string of performances now.
Yeah, and Amon Ra specifically had another good game. He's been having a couple of good games against the Vikings over his career. This was one where Jamison Williams was really taken out of the game plan because the Vikings knew that they couldn't contest with JMO's speed, and so they allocated more resources to him. And as a result, Amon Ra was able to feast. That throw on the final drive, potentially a little arrogant from Goff, the type of throw I might criticize, say, Jordan Love for, but I mean, he made it, and there was two guys in the area. Great accuracy. Amon-Ra, sure-handed catch. He had a few of those big sure-handed catches. Another player who ended up coming up really big in this game was Khalif Raymond. He had a couple of nice plays. He should have had a huge bomb that was just a little off, but I don't know if you saw the All 22. I think Justin Rogers put out a tweet of Raymond's release on his touchdown catch, where he, off the line, shakes Stephon Gilmore. Again, has had a long career, very good corner, and he puts him on the dirt, on the ground in the dirt with one move off the line, and that gives him the separation, to just walk in for a touchdown. Also, good block from Gibbs, but Raymond, who's going to be a big factor the next couple weeks with the news that came down last night. Are you how good of a performance was it for Raymond, and how needed of a performance was it?
Well, it certainly feels good going into the potential JMO suspension window, but Raymond really good in this game. Yeah, I did see that clip of the release and how he is able to shake him. Man coverage guy falls over pretty easy from that point onwards. Gets a little chip from Gibbs as he turns the corner and gets the touchdown. Should have had another touchdown if Goff hits him on that one. I actually think the most underrated play of Raymond in this game is he had a really nice catch on a third down. The ball was high and a little wide. He brought it in, got the feet in, and held on as he went to the ground. That was a crucial play. It kept a scoring drive going. So put that together, and this was definitely his best game of the year, right at the right time. And then you toss in some other guys who didn't do a ton in this game, and yet, Laporta has one really nice catch where throw under pressure from Goff, a little short, little wobbly, brings it in. Had one strike to Tim Patrick. The thing about this game and what we've seen this season in general is that when you have an offense like this that has enough weapons, you can stomach injuries for, short periods of time. You can stomach a suspension. You can stomach guys having an off game because we had weeks where it was like, man, what happened to Amon-Ra, right? And then this game, it's like, what happened to JMO? And it's like, it's okay. We still scored 30 points. You have a bad game for Montgomery. JMO doesn't have a catch. No worries, right? We're fine. No big issue here because we have Gibbs and we have Amon-Ra. You have enough players to pick up the slack for any sort of issue that pops up elsewhere in your skill position personnel, and that's a really nice luxury to have.
Yeah, and another player that we've been vocal about as being quiet all season has been Sam Laporta, who is
Yep.
has 14 catches on the season. He's averaging like barely over 2 catches a game right now. We'll see if he gets more involved against the Titans and Packers with JMO out of the lineup, but it just proves that the Lions can spread the ball around, and they're just an elite offense, right? Like, what the only thing that was missing at the start of the year was Goff's play. And now that Goff is playing to the level that he has been in October, the Lions offense has been unstoppable. They've put up 30 plus points in 3 straight games, and I think it's what, like 119 points in their last 3 games. Incredible. Like, absolutely incredible. And when the offense is playing like this, there's not much you're going to be able to do to beat Detroit. Like, the defense has been good enough. We'll talk about the defense in a minute here, but again, Lions offense spectacular, and it's really not much else to say aside from that.
Yeah, I think overall, just another great game from them. On the Laporta topic, it sure feels like we're due for a 8 catch, 9 catch kind of game for him that he erupts. I don't know if it'll be this week. Titans have a pretty good defense. Maybe it'll be against Green Bay. I don't know. Just feels like he's due. So when you can get him a little more involved, you'll be even better. But right now, it's as good as it can really get with 30, 40 points pretty consistently. And you look back to those early games in the season, really all that was missing was the Goff angle. I mean, if Goff was playing to what he's capable of, I think they put up 30 plus against Tampa, the way that game was, how easily they moved the ball. They just didn't finish drives. Same thing in Arizona. They were able to drive the ball. I mean, it's been there all year. Then the Goff thing came online, and suddenly they can't stop scoring. So, pretty darn good to be where you are right now, and you just got to keep it going.
Yeah. So, with that being said, we will now turn over to the defensive side of things, which is where we have some interesting. So, some people were critical of parts of the secondary. I was not one of them because I was actually very impressed with how Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold held Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in check. Jefferson had one big touchdown over Amik Robertson, maybe a little bit of a push off there, but it's kind of one of those where he didn't fully extend the arms, so they're not going to call it. Elite players make elite plays, and Jefferson is going to get his. But for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm pretty sure for the first time since Jeff Okuda was the one covering him, Justin Jefferson was held under 100 yards against the Lions. And, Jordan Addison, I don't even know, like, I'll have to pull it up, but he was not very active in this game aside from a big 51-yard catch out of the
I
back.
think that was his only catch.
Yeah. So the outside corners did a good job. Terrion had a couple of really nice reps against Jefferson as well, I thought. The Vikings moved Jefferson around at the line a lot just because they wanted to get him on Terrion, just to try to pick on the rookie a bit. The outside corners held their own, and Kirby, I thought, didn't have his best game. He got beat on the Addison completion. But once again, Brian Branch, the man of the the other man of the hour, the best defensive player we have left, and quickly emerging as a Pro Bowl candidate and potential All-Pro with how he's played this season. What did you like from the secondary in this game?
Well, on the we like PFF again. I think they have Brian Branch as the number one safety. So when their grades line up with our takes, then they're doing it right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he was great in this game, no question about it. The interception was masterful, baiting Darnold, as we've now seen in a couple weeks in a row with the one against Dallas last week. Was he the one that nearly had the scoop and score?
Yeah,
I know that Davis ripped it out.
It was Branch that had run it back for the touchdown.
Yeah, so he was close on that. But also 2 really nice PBUs. One on the first drive, I believe, that they get a stop on that was very needed. And then the second one comes on the 2-point conversion. And that ends up being really the play of the game. And what's impressive of that is, he's in man there. He's not... It's man with pre-snap motion too. So you watch the play before, he's running back and forth, tracking this guy before the snap. Then all of a sudden he has to come right down, make a really quick play. That's a lot harder than it seemed. Overall, this was his game of the year. Just really dominant performance all the way around. Just a great showing from him. And I think overall, as you mentioned, I didn't have major issues with the secondary. I mean, you have just a couple things that you'd like to clean up. They're culpable for partially culpable, but mostly culpable for the rushing touchdown at the start of the game. And then they have the bust to Addison. I don't have the all 22, so I haven't seen exactly what happened there, but it definitely looked like it was on the safeties. But other big plays they give up were just really nice plays overall from the Vikings, right? Like that touchdown, yeah, Jefferson beats Robertson, but he's not left in the dust, right? He's not wide open and it's an easy pitch and catch. Like he's pretty close there. It was a great throw, great catch. So be it. There's a snap, I think, on the second drive. They get the field goal on to start the game. They're in 3rd and 1. You get good interior rush. The zone looks pretty solid, and it's just a dagger from Darnold. Like, dropped into a perfect hole. Justin Jefferson lays out, makes a fingertip catch. Like, what are you going to do? Tip your cap, move on. So there were some nice plays. There was another throw from Darnold on a 2nd and 15 dime. He drops in between Robertson and Carlton Davis was a really nice throw. So there were some plays in there from the Vikings, and that's where maybe a healthy Hutchinson and a better pass rush is able to cover up some of that stuff. But the coverage overall didn't have a major issue with, and Terrion Arnold had his best coverage game of the year, I think, by far. PFF data had him down for 3 targets. I don't even remember those 3, honestly. Like, it was one of those games where he got to the end, I'm like, I don't remember him really being targeted much at all in this game. And generally, when you say that about a corner, it's a good sign.
Yeah, I think ironically, the only time I noticed Arnold in coverage and getting beat like pretty cleanly was the Branch interception. like
Right.
Arnold's the one in coverage. He loses his guy by a couple of yards, but Branch reads it so well that he's able to kind of mask that. There was one like rep where like it was press coverage against Jefferson, and he's just running a simple go route, and Arnold sticks with him and forces a bad throw on a play that ends up getting flagged and called back. So it doesn't count, but it was one of the better reps I've seen from him. Just a very solid game. Terrion's continuing to progress. He hasn't been dinged with a flag in a little bit, so all is well in the world. And I know that people have had their grievances with Arnold. He's a rookie. This is what you want to see. This is what you're going to see. He was a little shaky at the start, and you're just going to see that progression. You just want him to look better in December than he did in September, and he already looks better, and it's week 7. So, not too much to complain about there. The linebackers in this game I thought had a really good day. Malcolm Rodriguez and Jack Campbell in particular were really good. Jack Campbell quietly has emerged, back to PFF again. He's their 10th ranked linebacker in the league. Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. This year looking around, he's had so few plays. I brought him up last week as a guy that I think had been making strides, and you're just rarely seeing issues from the linebacker level. They're rarely blowing plays, rarely missing tackles. They've just been really, really solid. Nice effort from them all the way around. Malcolm Rodriguez gets beat on one catch for Aaron Jones on like a 3rd down, but he's in man coverage, and Darnold has something like 6 or 7 seconds to sit in the pocket. Like, that just can't happen, right? Like, Malcolm Rodriguez is not covering any running back for 7 seconds. Nobody is. So I don't put that one on him too much. Overall, good day from the linebackers. I thought it was fine from the defensive tackles as well. It's really just a discussion of sort of edge and pass rush. And for me on the ground, Aaron Jones is still really good.
Yeah.
He has those injury issues. I know why Green Bay moved on from him, but he's really good. He's one of the best running backs in the league to me in terms of just a moose to bring down. There was a couple plays in this game where he runs into the line and you're like, great, we got his stuff. And then he grinds out 4 yards. And so that leads to a little bit higher of a yards per carry clip than you'd like. But even with that, it's still only 4.2 if you deduct the one explosive. So pretty solid overall, but like the games against the Vikings last year, they really don't run it that much, and they love to pass when we see them play the Lions.
Yeah, and I think Jones pushed really hard to play in this game, and so Kevin O'Connell rewarded him by putting him in and giving him a chance, and Jones made the most of it. I think it is worth noting if Jones had missed this game, there's a very good chance that the Vikings have less than 80 rushing yards. They end up with 139 on the day. I would say that Aaron Jones made at least a 60-yard difference in that. Even ignoring the explosive, that was just Terrion crashing, Ukwu and Terrion failing to set the edge. kind of a combo there. But the interior
It was
guys,
also by the way, I think I had Robertson down on that one as well, where he
oh, did
bites
he?
with Arnold.
Yeah.
That he had a chance too. So you lose your edge, and then your DBs for some reason are totally reading the play wrong. That's pretty much what I had down as what happened there.
Yeah, and it was just like again, it was just an awful start. Like the offense goes 3-and-out with a bunch, like gives up a sack, whatever, and the Vikings crowd is super into it. The fake punt that we'll have to talk about later, and then the Vikings score almost immediately. Like it was just a concoction of bad things to start the game. But yeah, the linebackers were very solid. There was most of the time when the Vikings were passing the ball to the flats, the linebackers were wrapping up for like 2 yard, like very minimal run after catch. Like Anzalone, I know was big on that against the tight ends. He was great at like wrapping up after the catch. All of them just very solid day. The interior guys, I thought Ali McNeil had a good game pressuring. It is worth noting though, also Levi Onwuzurike played his fewest amount of snaps and failed to record a pressure for the first time this season. Not sure what the reason for the limited usage was, but there was a lot more DJ Reader in this game. Reader was
Well,
fine.
they had Onzarike play edge quite a bit in this game too. He
Yeah.
didn't have that many defensive tackle snaps, so that's definitely a factor to talk about.
Yeah, and the edge rotation, we might as well dive into it now. Josh Pascal was very banged up in this game. I thought he was good. He was good. He was fine. He had a sack in this game. He looked fine. He was clearly battling through some stuff. Aside from that, though, Isaac Ukwu, invisible. And then it was the Hodge, James Houston also invisible. And then Makai Wingo, Levi were kind of flexing out to the edge to try to help against the run, which worked a little bit. Not much help in pass rush because they're just so big that they can't really turn the edge that well. But right now, edge is a massive position of need. Dan Campbell has talked about how Brad Holmes is grinding away trying to make a trade. It seems like the Lions are zeroing in on Zadarius Smith. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but it does seem like it's only a matter of time as to when the Lions bring in some more help because there's only so many Trevor Nowaski delayed blitzes you can muster up.
Yeah, it's an obvious need. We were mostly in favor of them playing out the next few weeks up to the deadline just to get a real feel of what you need, but at this point, seems like you should make a trade either this week or next week. I mean, you'd love to have a guy in place for the Green Bay game. Might be a little early, but that's something you have to look at because it's just not getting it done. What we saw in this game, not what you want to see, really. They were able to get a couple pressures here and there, but it was pretty few and far between. And it's what we basically expected. Other places on the team are able to pick them up. They still have a lot of good players in this defense, but they got to address it. And it sounds like they will. So fine with me overall. Just a reality of the situation.
And it's like the Vikings do have a good duo at tackle, but just not good enough. This is a game where Aiden Hutchinson just being able to force Darnold off his spot every once in a while would have been very needed. But, it is what it is. And it is kind of funny that the Lions were kind of just experimenting in such a high pressure moment against the Vikings. It's a huge game, and they're just throwing out like this hodgepodge of edge guys, and they managed to win anyways, which you'll take. Like any day, your offensive line played horrible. You basically got no pressure off the edge, and you still win. It's a good day. Your offense put up over 30, and you only allowed 23 defensively. Like, again, there was a fumble return for a touchdown. The Lions defense gave up 23 points in this game. You'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you look at this game overall, yardage is pretty even, but it kind of felt like what the Lions did at least was more replicable in the sense that the Vikings are able to strike because they get a great field position off a fake punt, and then they get the scoop and score touchdown. So those are two things that feel a little more fluky. I mean, obviously, the Lions do have an interception of Darnold, but I think if they rematch with Darnold at quarterback, one interception of Darnold is a fairly replicable outcome. It's not like they got 5 interceptions. One off him is fairly reasonable. One more defensive thing I do want to bring up, and this is sort of a game theory related thing, but people that have known my takes about football are familiar with this for a while, but I am a lifelong believer, one of maybe my most firm football belief is you always blitz the Hail Mary. Always blitz the Hail Mary. And I am very, very happy that they know ball. And they did that, and it worked, and we had no shenanigans on the final play. It's I've believed this ever since the Rodgers Hail Mary, maybe even before that. I just can't get over the belief and the orthodoxy on Hail Mary defense that we're supposed to take this play that is supposed to be a one in a million play, the 50, 60, 65 yard heave into the end zone, and we're going to turn it into a game of chance. We're going to let it get into the end zone. We're going to have 12 dudes jump up in the air, and we're going to just hope that their guys don't catch it. That's crazy. That is crazy. Like, even with the way it's traditionally defended, the conversion rate isn't that high, but it's too high. It's way too high for what should be 1%, 0.5% play. We saw it happen the previous week on Monday Night Football with the Jets against the Bills, Rodgers doing it. And what did the Bills do? They rushed, I think it was two, maybe it was three. But when you rush two or three and you are just conceding that you're going to let the quarterback throw it into the end zone, you're giving too much ground. You're giving way too much ground. You need to ensure that that ball never reaches the end zone. If he wants to throw it for 30 yards and then the guy runs, then you tackle him. It's fine. It's the end of the game or the end of the half. You're fine in that situation. But the just let's sit back and let the quarterback stand around and heave it. If it gets caught on you, you deserved it. But the Lions didn't do that. They rushed five. They had it schemed up very well to overload one side, get the sack, game over with. Exactly how it should be defended every single time. So shout out Aaron Glenn on that one.
Yeah, and shout out Alex Anzalone and Trevor Nowoski for running that delayed blitz to perfection. It completely fooled the Vikings' interior offensive line, and Nowoski came in unblocked for an uncontested sack, which thank God, because I don't know if you want to talk about this in the game theory or now, but off the back of a very confusing flag, no 10-second runoff spike that had 0 seconds on the clock, but suddenly there's an extra second. Very weird end to the game, and I'm happy that Nowoski just put an end to it. We don't have any shenanigans. Like, let's not make a 10-second run off the headline, and let's just wipe our hands of it, get out. I was very thankful for that. Yeah, I don't know. Any other notes on the defense?
Not really. I mean, I thought it was overall a pretty solid performance. Yards per play a little high. Take out a couple explosives. It's more in manageable range. Still maybe higher than you like, but as we've noted, the Lions have Brian Flores' number. Vikings have also given Lions some trouble. You go back to that game last year, the two games. Nick Mullins passed for a lot of yards. I thought this was a better performance than those, even if the numbers don't totally show it. I think they made some progress. Not the end of the world. Solid performance. Let's move on.
You didn't give up 200 yards to Justin Jefferson. That's a win in my books.
There you go.
Moving on to, well, we'll do special teams then game theory, because I think we do need to take a moment of appreciation for Jake Bates, a man who everyone has been critical of all season just because he looks a little shaky on PATs. The Lions have placed their faith in him, and it pays off as he's perfect. He's not missed a field goal this season, and he drills, was a 44-yarder for the win in Minnesota, which is a very tough place to play. The biggest kick of his life so far, and he has just shown time and time again he is as cool as they come. He is super clutch. We saw that in the UFL with the 60-yard game winners that he was making. Just absolutely clutch performance from him, and I'm feeling really good about kicker right now, especially comparative to the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, this going into this kick, I was like, Jake Bates' NFL career is on the line right here. This is he needs to prove himself as an NFL kicker, and this is the kick he got to make. Like that's a lot of what it is. Kicking in the NFL is like, do you make the early kicks in your career, the ones that get you into the door? And he made a big one against the Chiefs in the preseason at the end of the game, and then he made one here in this one, and that pretty much all you basically need to get yourself locked in as an NFL kicker for now. I mean, he has a hold on the position. was a good kick, did everything he needed to do, and he hasn't. I don't think he's missed a field goal this year. He's missed the one extra point. Fine by me through this point, but going back to the start of the season, we always knew there was going to be one of these moments that would pop up, and he took care of it.
Yeah, and like again, it doesn't matter how good of a team you are. You're gonna have games that come down to the wire. We saw the Chargers game last year, where again comes down to a game-winning kick. You're gonna need a kicker to deliver in these moments. That's why they're on the team. And Jake Bates just absolutely clutch performance there, delivers, and he's definitely bought himself goodwill. So hopefully we can put those "we need a kicker" conversations to bed for a little bit. Um, Aside from that, special teams not especially noteworthy. Jack Fox had a few good punts down inside the 15, inside the 10, but the kick coverage wasn't really tested all that much in this game. So why don't we turn it over to game theory?
Yeah, one quick thing before we do. Nice, the one Fox punt pinned him in the 10
Yeah.
in a situation where he really wanted to flip the field. The defense then flips the field right back when they give up the Addison bomb, but he did his job on that one.
Yeah.
So the fake punt, it's interesting. That's the first thing you can say. I don't recall ever seeing a speed option fake punt. Do you remember one?
Nope, don't believe so.
Yeah, that's the first time I think I'd ever seen that concept. And looking at it again, I think it has a shot of working if you don't have the pre-snap motion. And I don't really remember the Lions putting that pre-snap motion on tape, that particular one. That I think you have to show it a little bit more before you do it because they do the pre-snap motion and it's sort of like, uh-oh, look at that. Like, is this something? And then it was something. And the way they lined up pre-snap, if you can get one block on either the edge or the play side linebacker, you've got a shot of it working. Because if you can get the pitch pulled off, then I think it can work. But they kind of tip it with that pre-snap motion, and as a result, the Vikings are able to read it. Both guys are out in space. There's no need for a pitch because you're dead to rights. It just doesn't work. It's an interesting concept for a play, but I just don't think the idea behind it was totally fleshed out, and the need to put that motion on tape before you run it, and also just a really risky time to do it in an and seven situation, way backed up early in a game like this. I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was really implemented or executed what you really needed to be.
Yeah, and so the explanation for why the Lions faked the punt is they always go into these situations and they say, it's on the table if we get the look we want. And apparently they got that look, and that's why they decided to go. My problem with it isn't necessarily the execution of it or whatever, because the fake punts are a risky play. That's kind of the point of them. You're just trying to catch your opponent off guard. My problem with it is the when and the situation, like the entire situation. Start of the game, completely unnecessary. Like I understand the one against the Chiefs at the start of last year because it's like, okay, you know what, you want to prove yourself in a big moment. It's fourth and short. Let's just go. You just need a yard, push the pile, whatever. Fourth and 8 on the first drive of the game, not a time to fake a punt. And I don't think you should be faking a punt in fourth and 6 plus. Like if it's fourth and 5 or shorter, you only need a couple of yards. Sure. Fourth and 8 is also just like you're adding extra layers to the risk of the play that just seem unnecessary, in my opinion. And again, you set the Vikings up in scoring range right away, and then they end up with the 34-yard touchdown run. It just, like, obviously that compounded things and made it all the way more bad, but just not at all what I thought was a good time to run that punt. The Lions will fake a few more throughout the season. That's just who they are. They like to do it, and, they are pretty good at it. But next time, let Jack Fox throw, please.
Yeah, the Jack Fox throwing ones work way better, I feel like, than the other ones. If you're gonna do a running fake with you hike where you hike it to the up back, I feel like it's got to be in a little shorter yardage than and seven. Like it can't be and one because then it's gonna be too obvious. But
Like
I think a
three.
little closer, yeah, and five and four, something like that. It just was too risky and kind of at the wrong time to me. So is what it is. They have a very good track record of these things. Just gotta take it and move on. You're gonna have to swallow a couple L's on those to get the ones to work, and I think they're like 9 of 12 or something in Campbell's time. So fine with me overall. Just didn't quite nail this one, and thankfully it wasn't consequential. I do have a quick note before we get into the full game theory. Brief ref talk. What was up with that picked up flag on the Dorsey hold? On was it a punt or a kick? I don't remember what it was, but very strange.
So I think it was on. I think it might have been a punt, and that was the most blatant hold I've seen in a while. Dorsey is practically turned around from the hold for at least 5 seconds. Everyone on the like they threw the like there's multiple flags down, and then they pick it up for I don't know what reason. I don't know. Like that was the an obvious holding. There's no reason for that flag to be picked up. I don't know what the other officials saw on that play. Unacceptable.
Strange. That's all you
Yeah.
can really say is you're watching the play and it's like, oh wow, look at that. He's just getting absolutely held. Thank God they got the flag on that one. Then they're like, no flag. And then they get a holding call on the very next play against the Vikings, the first play from scrimmage of the drive. So it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
I
I
don't.
thought it was overall a pretty well officiated game, but that was
Yeah.
that was weird.
I don't know if the holding on the next play was a makeup call or just a case of ball don't lie, but regardless, works out anyways. And then again, like the play at the end of the game, it's always funny that we seem to discover new rules every time the Lions play. I don't know if I did not know that that kind of play did not warrant a 10-second runoff. I still am adamant that the game was over, that they did not get the spike off in time, but alas, it doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah, the I think the explanation was that if you're set, there's not a 10-second runoff, right? They said a legal formation, but you are set, then it's 10-second runoff. If it's a penalty about not being set for the spike, then it is a runoff. Didn't know that one. We learn new things every week.
Yeah. So why don't we get into the game theory now?
This is the good stuff. So, first thing to note here, Greg Olson. I don't know, man. Very, very weird reactions to the Lions' management of the clock, which I thought was perfect from the start. I had no issues
Yeah.
with. Didn't understand why he was going crazy about that.
Like this is a like you're in a situation at the end of the game where you want this to be the last drive. You do not want the Vikings to have a chance to match your field goal to win the game. And so they take it down to the 2-minute warning. Greg Olson is losing his mind at the Lions wasting 30 seconds on one 6-yard run play or whatever it was. And then they run the ball again to Gibbs. They take another 40 seconds off the clock before running their next play. And again, he's like, the Lions are just being too slow. Like, what are they doing? They're taking too long. And then Gibbs gets it down to like the 30-yard line immediately. And he's like, okay, now you can run it. Like, thank you for your blessing,
The,
Greg.
the best part about that is he's already melting down, and then he's like, I just believe you don't run the clock until you're actually in field goal range. And he says that as the ball is hiked on the play that then gets them immediately into field goal range. The comedic timing there was very good. The thing with the clock management in that phase is like it's all calibrated to the kind of offense you have in the situation, right? If we're talking about the current Michigan football team, it's like our offense is terrible. We can't move the ball, and our pace of play is one of the slowest in college football. We literally cannot snap the ball with more than 10 seconds on the play clock because we have to huddle up after every play and we move at this plodding elephant pace. Yeah, if that's the case and they're running 30 off with 2.5 to go, you're like, uh-oh, they're not going to get the ball down in time. But this is a Lions team that is perfectly capable of running a 2-minute drill, has a great passing quarterback who's on fire. They moved the ball all day after the first couple drives. No, no reason for concern there. There was, especially in the modern NFL, where field goal range is not that far. You get the
Yeah.
kickoff at the 30-yard line. a lot of kickers, especially Bates too, have big legs. Like we're not talking about that much yardage. They're not driving from their own 5 yard line to get down the field. He just seemed totally. He just didn't seem to know the situation or have a really good concept of what was going on there.
Yeah, and the other thing too is the Lions had 2 timeouts. They can stop the clock if they want to. Like there is no reason for urgency. If they needed a touchdown, okay, then you could talk about speeding things up because you have to get all the way down the field. They needed a field goal, and with the current NFL where 59 yarders are just a slight inconvenience, like you need 25 yards and you're in field goal range. That's easy.
Yeah, so the Olsen thing, very weird. Campbell handled it perfectly well. You wanted that drive to be it.
Yep.
You wanted it to either end in your field goal kicker making or missing it with as little time as possible, or turnover on downs, or turnover. Right? That's it. Those are the three outcomes. There's no punting on this drive. This is it. And so they managed that well. The bigger point of conversation comes up once they get the Amon-Ra first down. They run the ball, and they had 1:07 on the clock. They run a play. It's a Gibbs run. It gets down to 1:02. Minnesota takes timeout number 2. So now you're looking at second down, and they have a decision to make in that situation. They end up kneeling it down twice, one of which burns Minnesota's final timeout. The next one runs it down. They end up running it down, I believe, to 18 seconds. You had the potential to run it down quite a bit further if you run 2 more plays, full plays, running plays like the previous one that took about 5 seconds each off the clock. If you run one play, you go down to 57 seconds. Minnesota takes a timeout. Then you run another play, gets you down to between 50 and 52 by the time the play clock is reset. You're taking your final timeout, and Bates is kicking with between 10 and 15 seconds left. The kick play happens. You end up leaving Minnesota between 5 and 10 seconds, and they really never have the opportunity to even get in that Hail Mary situation. What was your take on the kneel downs versus the running plays there?
Exactly that. Like so okay. The counter argument is you're very concerned about Minnesota's ability to create fumbles and turnovers. They just ripped one out from Montgomery, so you want to make sure that you're as safe as possible. But there is a workaround that the Lions did once and then never did again, which was have Goff take the snap and not go down right away. Just wait for the defense to get to him. They ran the one kneel down. I think it took 3 seconds off the clock. If you do that again, that's an extra 3 seconds. You're down to 15 seconds at the end of the game instead of the 18 or 19 that they had. The line, there was a little bit too much fear factor going on. I think they should have run the ball again. Just give it to Gibbs. You just trust him, and that way you can maybe even gain a couple of extra yards, make the kick a little bit easier for Bates, and drain the extra time. Again, doesn't matter because the Vikings mismanaged the end of the game there by taking 8 seconds to throw and then throwing in the middle of the field. But alas, the Lions did not handle that as well as they could have.
Yeah, that was basically my take. I think it was just too much of a fear mentality, which is weird because you rarely see Campbell coach in that manner, right? This is the guy that played the starters in Week 18 last year. Very much a believer in you don't coach football fearing that every play is going to be the last play of someone's career. And I think it's the same thing here that you can't coach football fearing a fumble on every single play. And obviously, if you are in a situation where a kneel down literally ends the game, you should kneel it down. We don't need to relitigate the Miami Georgia Tech thing from last year. But in this situation, if you're that scared of your running back fumbling, I don't know. Why are we coaching football at all, right? It feels like a little too conservative to me. And if you're really that paranoid, as you mentioned, you can do the delayed kneel down. You can also do a pitch or something and just have the running back run wide and then slide down as soon as someone comes up. That itself kills a few more seconds. And in this situation, every second killed is advantageous. So I would have liked to see them be a little more aggressive and run that thing down to the point that really Minnesota had basically no time left. The other point of conversation in this final sequence is the decision to kick it through the end zone rather than a squib. What was your take on this one?
I think it's the same thing. Are you more scared of a Hail Mary or of them like hitting a play out of bounds, or are you more scared of a kickoff return in that situation? I personally am a lot more scared of the Lions defense potentially getting too passive and the Vikings taking 20 yards and going out of bounds with a chance to set up a Hail Mary or a game-winning field goal attempt. So I'd rather squib in that situation. You know Bates can do it. He did it like there was I think three times in this game where he had the ball land in like inbounds in the like I don't know what they call it with the new kicking rules, but in the field of play, which would have forced a shorter touchback or forced them to return it. And in this situation, if you force them to return it, it's gonna take at least 5 6 seconds off the clock, and then again. It's just every second matters in that situation. So I'd rather attack the clock knowing that they probably won't get past the 30 anyways.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a reaction to the Dallas kick return in
Maybe.
the previous week, which we chalked up mostly to a holding, but I just don't. I just was curious about that decision. I definitely would have squibbed. And I agree with you. The fear of the pass and Minnesota moving the ball that way is more than a kickoff. But I don't know. They turtled a little bit at the end, which is unusual for them. But hey, they got away with it.
Yeah.
So hopefully unlikely to approach a situation like that again.
Yeah. Do we have any other game theory notes?
I don't think so. I This was a pretty clean game overall. I don't think they never went on fourth down that I recall. They didn't
I'll confirm.
really have anything at the end of the half. They ran it in and then Vikings mostly kneeled it down. So that was all I had.
Yeah. The only fourth down attempt was the fake punt at the start. So we can
Yeah.
move
So
around to the rest of the NFL. Um, First of all, I just want to take some more time to appreciate that the Jets are the most unserious franchise in the league. They make the big move acquiring Devontae Adams. They make a big deal of it. They have the whole planned Devontae Adams reveal in Aaron Rodgers' house on the Pat McAfee show. And then they get absolutely destroyed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that, even though Russell Wilson was starting in that game, he ended up playing fine. Like he had a solid game, and yeah, some sweet karma delivered to the Jets, who their season is continuing to slip away from them, to really no one's surprise.
yeah, nothing too new about that. All you can really say is enjoy this world you chose, New York. Like
Yep.
the Jets wanted this. They courted Aaron Rodgers despite all of the bad vibes around that, and they've kind of gotten what they deserve, so to speak. I mean, I think there's maybe some talent still in Rodgers, but it was very clear from that last season in Green Bay that it was starting to become a bit of a sideshow. That even during the previous years of his peak in the 2010s, this guy was he had some weird stuff about him, but he was a really good player. It wasn't like a national topic. And then definitely like post COVID, he decided to launch a new career as a podcaster, and very clearly that is taking away from his time spent practicing football. And he's also 40 years old now and had an injury. Like it, I don't know, just feels kind of cooked, and it kind of seemed that way when he was leaving Green Bay. So they asked for it, and they're getting what they wanted.
Yep. And so now, as to more serious teams, we the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers. We can talk about the Niners side of that in a second. Patrick Mahomes is currently leading a 6-0 football, the only undefeated team left in the NFL. And he currently has more interceptions than touchdown passes on the season. He has 8 interceptions to 6 touchdown passes. And it doesn't matter because the Chiefs defense is one of the top five in the league. And they're getting away with a whole lot of stuff in Kansas City. And I really don't know what to chalk it up to aside from voodoo magic at this point.
Petition to build a wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton for coordinators, and we are inducting Steve Spagnuolo as our inaugural class because he's one of the greats in that genre of guy that failed fairly miserably as a head coach, although very difficult situation to be put into. But man, go back to the Giants when he was DC there in the famous game against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. now this second life with the Chiefs, where his defense is carrying Mahomes' offense, and one of the great defensive coordinators of all time. And he's as big of an asset to that team as anybody else on that team. I don't know what to make of the Mahomes thing. He cut him a lot of slack, but feels like at some point it's going to catch up to him. That their running backs, Hunt, Pacheco, Steele, all are rushing for under 4 yards per carry. They got let off the hook against Baltimore week 1, but they got to start playing better. Like, they're still winning games, but they do have to get that offensive side going, because I feel like at some point there's going to be an issue that pops up that they can't outrun on the offensive side and have their defense just bail them out. So they're still 6-0, still on an easy path for a 1 seed in that conference, but some cracks in the armor are showing a little bit on offense.
It was the first 2 games, especially. They are an Isaiah likely big toe away from potentially the Ravens attempting a 2-pointer to win it. And in the game against the Bengals, who have been continuing to struggle this season, the Bengals pass interference on the final drive sets up a game-winning field goal, like on a
Very questionable call.
A 4th and 14 too. Like, it's literally last play of the game, and they get bailed out by that. So Chiefs are definitely, I don't know. It's a little bit of the old Patriots mystique, where it's like they're just the boogeyman in the NFL right now. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, you expect them to probably be in the AFC Championship again, and we'll see if any of the other top dogs in the AFC can topple them. On to the more relevant side for the Lions, the 49ers are 3-4 and 3rd in their division, and next week they have a game against a Cowboys team that is angry about the loss against Detroit and coming off a bye week and might be getting some reinforcements on defense as well. The 49ers might be getting in a little bit of trouble at this point, and they just lost Brandon Ayuk to a torn ACL, season-ending injury. Deebo Samuel is in the hospital with pneumonia right now. All kinds of things are going bad for them. Right now, their healthiest receiver is Ricky Pearsall, who was shot in the chest 2 months ago. So it's the 49ers are in a very interesting spot. What's your take on them?
Yeah, the Niners, I don't know. We talked about this last week, and I wasn't too concerned because their yardage differential still looks really good. They're outgaining opponents by 84 yards per game on average is what I have written down here. But on the other hand, you do have to win some games, and the problem is they haven't won enough of them, and their schedule remains difficult. And if you drop more games, then winning the NFC West becomes a harder proposition, and honestly, then we get into wildcard conversations because you look at this schedule. Now they're up to 4 losses. They got Cowboys this week. We don't think too highly of that team, but Cowboys are coming off a bye. Do or die for them. Go at Tampa Bay a couple weeks after that. At Packers, at Bills. Still have the Bears, still have the Seahawks remaining. At host the Lions later in the year. They finish at Arizona. Like, hard to see them not dropping at least 6 games in total, and that feels like their ceiling is 11-6 at this point, which obviously is going to rule them out for a 1 seed, but also could put them in some jeopardy in the West. Good news for them is that no one really has pulled away in that division, but I don't know. The McCaffrey injury, the Ayuk stuff, at the moment just doesn't feel like their year at the moment.
Yeah, I think the latest on Christian McCaffrey was that he's not going to play in Week 8, and then they have the Week 9 bye, so maybe we see him in that Buccaneers game in Week 10. I don't know. That, like, it's just such a weird situation where for those of you who play fantasy football out there, are like, Christian McCaffrey, unanimous #1 fantasy pick. He's going to be amazing, 2,000 total yards, and then like a few days before the season starts, yeah, he's actually not going to play, and he's actually not going to play for half the season, which very very odd situation in how the Niners handled that. Yeah, like you said, it's hard to see a world where the Niners get to 12 wins. I would even go further. Like, 11 wins is going to be very challenging to hit as well. They're probably going to be a wild card team, and that means the #1 seed is going to be, at this point, it's the Lions, versus their division rivals. It seems like whoever wins the NFC North will be the 1 seed in the conference, barring something unexpected, whether the Buccaneers really take off or something of that nature. It's going to be interesting to monitor, and the Niners, we'll see if they can get back on track around the NFL again. Now we'll go to the division, which, by the way, the NFC North through Week 7 currently all in playoff positions. This absolutely insane. The Bears on a bye week maintain their spot in the wild card. The Packers survive the Houston Texans, and both losses Houston has suffered this season come off the back of awful CJ Stroud performances against an NFC North defense. Green Bay escapes on a last-second field goal in similar fashion to the Lions with their new kicker Brandon McManus. Green Bay 5-2. How are we feeling about them?
I didn't see any of this game because it was overlapping with our game. Look at the quick look at the box score reveals a game that Green Bay won pretty solidly. They outgained Houston by 80. They outgained him on a yards per play basis by 1.5. Really seems to me that the only reason Houston is in this game is 2 interceptions from Jordan Love plus a muff punt that puts Houston at the 11-yard line. They score a quick touchdown off of because the offensive box score for the Texans is bad in this game. Stroud 10 of 21 for 86 yards. Also takes 4 sacks for minus 31 yards. Mixon at least rushes for 4.6 yards per carry. There's little else there. Just an anemic performance from their offense, given a little daylight because the Packers continue to have a really up and down Jordan Love roller coaster. We talked about this last week. We've talked about it in previous weeks, but he remains the everything is happening quarterback. Like this stat line is kind of the quintessential 24 of 33 for 220, 6.7 yards an attempt. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3 sacks for minus 25 yards. Everything is happening when he drops back. You don't know what it is. It could be great. It could be terrible. And it's been enough for the Packers thus far, but he, I believe, now has 8 interceptions in 6 games this season. Too much.
He is the master of chaos, and
Sorry, not 6 games, 5 games. 8 interceptions in 5 games. He's got 1 in every game.
Well, that bodes well for the Lions when they play them in a couple weeks. If you can have another Kirby Joseph day against Green Bay. Yeah, master of chaos, and everyone has to endure his wrath because he is, like you said, everything happens in Green Bay games this season. So again, we're just gonna have to see if he fixes those issues or if those are going to be the Packers' undoing. For what it's worth,
it doesn't feel fixable to me because it's also related to what he's doing well, right? This is the very thing we talked about in previous weeks. Is like when half of your touchdowns are threaded through the fingers of the defenders, inevitably you're going to throw interceptions, and it feels like he's going to have to totally change his play style, and it will deduct the good as well in addition to the bad because it will require reining everything in because they're inherently related to each other.
There was a passing touchdown to Tucker Kraft in this game, this close to being an interception. The defender dives across the screen, or dives across the end zone right where the ball is, and just miss it. That's it's a 7-point swing right there on that play. A higher Jordan Love is the ultimate high risk, high reward player right now, and yeah, it's just gonna matter of if those negative plays happen at the wrong time for the Packers. For what it's worth, their defense looks good at least. But yeah.
Well, this was definitely their best defensive game, which is good to see because they've had some games that were not as strong defensively in my mind. So good bounce back for them. They go to play the Jags this weekend. We won't learn much from that one, and then they'll have the big showdown with the Lions. So that'll definitely set the stage for quite a bit. My final note on Love, obviously, is if we're doing the whole Green Bay quarterback mold thing, which I generally hate, he is clearly the child of Brett Favre and not Aaron Rodgers at this point in time because Aaron Rodgers was pretty much defined by his refusal to ever throw interceptions to a point later in his career where his touchdowns had dipped so dramatically it felt like he was hindering himself by being so, against throwing the interception. But Favre never had that problem, and Jordan Love is very much in that same bucket as well. And it's just about keeping that ratio intact because it's running a little hot right now. But there's still a good team with a lot of talent, and the Bears were off this week, so we didn't learn a lot new about the North. But I do agree with your note that it's really hard to see someone not from the North winning or getting the number one seed at this point in time. I
Yeah.
mean, it's Bucks and Falcons are 4-3, Seahawks 4-3. I guess Commanders at 5-2 are the one team, and I don't believe in that. Not
Yeah.
not for a minute.
They might make the playoffs, but they might even get a home playoff game, depending on if the Eagles or Cowboys can kind of right the ship here. But I mean, the Commanders. Does anyone really take them seriously as contenders at this point in time?
Not yet. We gotta see more of it, at least in my mind, to
Yeah.
believe in it.
Yep, same. So NFC runs through the North right now, and we'll just see which of those teams emerges. Another, this is another major storyline. Everyone's favorite, Deshaun Watson, down for the year with a torn Achilles. One of my favorite backups in the league, Dorian Thompson Robinson, filling in. I kind of hope he does well because he's a fun quarterback to watch sometimes. A little chaotic, but I like young mobile guys. Give them a shot. Watson injury and Cleveland unanimously rejoiced, not just because they might have a chance to win some games now, but little known thing in NFL contracts is there's usually a insurance policy with injuries that provides cap relief the year after an injury happens. So the Browns actually might have more cap space for next year because of this Watson injury. That's going to be one we're going to like that we'll see what happens around the league. But yeah, Cleveland, we expect them to sell off some pieces, but their quarterback of the now and the future is done for at least this season, probably into next season as well.
What's the path forward here for the Browns? Because to me, this is a total rebuild. What they
Uh,
should do. I don't know what they will do, but I don't know. I don't know what the path at this point is. I mean, you can tank this season, get a high draft pick. I mean, to me, that just feels like you should start kicking off a more proper rebuild, but I don't know what they'll do.
maybe call Payne to blow up the stadium. I don't know. Like, there's not much you can do. Now, on to things that are more impactful for next week. Jamison Williams, for the second time in 3 years, has been suspended, this time for 2 games for violating the NFL's banned substances policy. Um, Not sure what he took. It can sometimes be as simple as something in cold medicine, but this is one, unlike the gambling policy where maybe the rules were unclear, like instructions unclear, and he was suspended. This is entirely on him. He needs to know what he can and cannot put in his body. And it's going to cost him 2 games, it looks like. And, Titans game, you should be fine without him. But the Packers game, losing Jamison Williams for that could be very significant. Yeah, this just sucks, man.
Yeah, hit to the vibes, not what you want to see. Ultimately, not the biggest deal because if you can't survive one guy being out for 2 games, then what are we doing? Like, this is football. It's not that different than a guy getting banged up. And frankly, it's better because there won't be lingering effects more than likely. That said, yeah, it's not what you want, not the guy you wanted it to happen to. Like, right? Like, if this happens to, like, Sam Laporta, it's like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Then we move on. The fact it is JMO and continuing to feed the endless cycle of discussion and that kind of thing just when it seemed like we had been freed from that discourse is a big bummer. It is on him. It's strange that it's only 2 games. I guess I was reading that like it could have been like a prescription medication that he didn't register with the league or something like that. Like it's a pretty refined category of what this kind
Mhm.
of thing is because it's very unusual. Like, yeah, MLB violate the policy. I think it's 81 games, half the season. In tennis, it can be, out for a year, out for multiple years. I mean, a lot of the other sports, it's pretty, pretty firm. And this, I've never heard of a 2-game suspension, or outside of the NFL. I guess Jimmy G had it happen to him last year, I guess is what I read. So, not the biggest violation. Still just a bummer. Gonna need a Khalif Raymond legacy game, Tim Patrick legacy game, Allen Robinson legacy game. I don't know. Whoever it is, someone's got to step up in that Green Bay game. You would have liked it ideally to be not in the Green Bay window. I think if you could have chosen potentially when this was, you probably would have picked that Jaguars Colts double dip in mid-November, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. So tough for JMO. I think he put out a statement through Eric Woodyard that's just like, you got to take it on the chin, move on. It is what it is. Another piece of news around the league. This one, little strange. The Los Angeles Rams are listening to offers on Cooper Cup. They are willing to eat some of his remaining salary and they are seeking a second round pick. Seems like the Rams are comfortable punting this season, given that they have Puka Nakua, who's, when he comes back, he's a very good receiver and does a lot of the same things as Cooper Cup. So they can afford to expend Cup, who's on the wrong side of 30. But yeah, a little weird for the Rams that made the playoffs last year, and now they're just like content to start offloading assets. I don't know.
Is it a possible rebuild?
Maybe like we might be. I figured they would have another year or two before they really got into that, but might be time.
Yeah, it just depends on what they want to do with Stafford long term. I mean, they're getting up there on some of these guys, right? I mean, Stafford, I don't remember what year was it. Was he born in 87 or 88? One of those years. I'd have to look that up. But he's got to be mid to high 30s now. And the amount of years they were spending trading draft picks away, it's 1988. So he's
Yeah,
36 at the
36.
moment, turning 37 next year. And he's just taken so many shots. And they traded draft picks away a lot of years. They've had some, cap things, other retirements, etc. I don't know. They got a lot out of that roster last year. They got into the playoffs, but we saw it fall apart so quickly this year with a quick spate of injuries very early in the season. They just feel like a pretty fragile foundation. If you're talking about selling off Cooper Cup, I guess the question is where is the path to winning a Super Bowl in the near future for this team that does not include a retool of some sorts?
Well, and the more cynical view is if they offload Cooper Cup, start a rebuild, that also probably means Sean McVay will move on. There's been rumors for the last couple of years about him being ready to move on from this phase of his career, maybe move to the booth, maybe move on to another challenge of some kind, just enjoy retired life. But yeah, whenever the Rams do decide to rebuild, that will probably mean the end of Sean McVay's time with LA as well. Are there any other NFL wide stories you wanted to touch on?
The only one I think it was last week, but we didn't talk about it. The Tom Brady,
Mm,
Raiders slash not allowed to do the broadcasting thing, except he can be on the show, but he can't do any of the other stuff. Very weird to me.
Yeah, very odd. Like I remember when it happened, I fired off a tweet that's like, "Wow, this is a lot of things that like really prevent him from doing his job." Like he's not allowed to speak ill of the officials. He's not really allowed to talk about other teams much. Um, like I almost wonder if he would have been better served just doing the Raiders play by play every game at this point because there's not much he can do. So maybe I think my theory is he might transition to a role in the studio, as, like move away from play by play next year, depending on how the rest of the season goes. But yeah, very strange, very strange.
Yeah, unusual. I don't really recall there being another situation quite like this where you have somebody who's got a share of the ownership and also kind of has their hand in the pot as well on the broadcasting side. I don't know. Really weird. Feels like he doesn't know exactly what he wants to do with his post playing career, and he's just choosing things randomly as they come along, and now they're conflicting.
Yeah.
Very very strange to me.
Yep, but yeah, I think we might have Tom Brady again for the Packers game in a couple weeks because that's an afternoon one on I believe on Fox. So we'll see. That's the reason it didn't get flexed to Sunday Night Football. I know people were upset that Colts Vikings got flexed. It's just because Fox was not going to relinquish that game because, yeah, Packers Lions is a draw, and people are going to tune in for that one. Aside from that, though, the Lions 5-1 taking on the 1-5 Tennessee Titans. The Lions currently 11-point favorites in this game. Is there any concern of a trap game here?
Not really. I mean, it's the NFL. Any team can lose to any team, but there's nothing really obvious to me that stands out about this Titans team that is a big cause for alarm. Their yardage differential isn't that bad. The biggest thing you see, though, that pops up very quickly is the fact that they hold teams to really low yardages, but also don't gain any yardage themselves on offense, which is an interesting sort of subplot between the AFC and the NFC, which is that the state of quarterback play in the AFC on average is so much lower than the NFC. And I was doing this last week where I was looking at the yardage marks of each team, and the defenses in the AFC, yards per game against, so much better than the NFC. And you're just kind of wondering how much of this is chicken and the egg sort of situation, where you have maybe better defenses, but they're also playing vastly worse offenses. And so you look at who the Titans have played this season. They played Dolphins without Tua. They played Packers without Jordan Love. They played the Jets. They played the Colts. They played Caleb Williams in his first ever game against the Bears. I mean, really the only team that they've played with a functional veteran quarterback is the Bills last week, and they gave up 389 yards and 34 points. So I think they're probably being overrated a little bit. That said, they do have some guys that most people like. We talked about Harold Landry last week. They got Ernest Jones from the Rams. They signed Snead from the Chiefs. They have our old friend Quandre Diggs. They drafted Devondre Sweat from Texas. They still have Simmons as well. I mean, they get some nice names. I think their defense is pretty solid, but the offense looks pretty catastrophic with Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
Well, even if Will Levis comes back, that's not exactly an improvement. Should be noted, L'Jarius Sneed missed the Bills game and did not practice all of last week, so he is going to be very questionable for the game on Sunday. This is one where you can comfortably if the Lions lose this game, something has gone catastrophically wrong, i.e., like a Goff injury or something of that nature. Because again, going into the Cowboys game, we said, oh, the Lions stack up well with them, no excuse. This is even further along that spectrum. Like, the Lions are one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the entire league. The Titans, probably going to be one of the 5, 6, 7 worst teams in the NFL this season. No excuse. Like, this is one where you just got to take care of business. Let's get out of this game clean, no injuries. You could win by 3 points, you could win by 30 points. I don't really care. Just win. Keep it clean, no injuries, and let's get ready for the Packers. Don't overlook them, obviously, but yeah, this is a game where you should be good.
Yep, that's pretty much my take on this situation. Just get the win, move on to the next week, get to 6-1, and then start studying up for one of your biggest weeks of the season against Green Bay.
Yeah. So aside from that, do you have any other closing thoughts, Alex?
No, not particularly. Good week last week, and hopefully get another win under the belt. And we'll have a lot to talk about next week with the trade deadline coming up and the Packers game.
Yeah, the only other thing is maybe try to trade for someone sooner rather than later so they could be up to speed for that Packers game. But yeah, again, just looking forward to the game on Sunday. Hopefully the Lions can take care of business and have little drama in that one. But that'll be it for this episode. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you follow the show. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. You can follow us, the Payne and Drain Show, on Twitter as well. I think it's just called Payne and Drain. I forget what the handle is, but you can find it on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube, like the video, follow the podcast. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you guys next week with another recap. And in the meantime, let's go Lions. Cheers, everyone.